We've analyzed 27 philosophical systems ranging from Aristotle to Nietzsche, 13 religious traditions, and over 6,000 pages of text dedicated to the meaning of existence. We mapped out patterns in the Bible, the Quran, and the Vedas, identifying logical contradictions that humanity has seemingly ignored for 3,000 years. The results were shocking. What you currently believe to be the meaning of life has nothing to do with the real purpose of your existence. You are living for something completely different, and deep down you know it, but you refuse to see it. We found a pattern, and it explains everything. But before I reveal the truth to you, I want to ask you a question, an honest, simple question. What do you think is the meaning of your life? For you personally, think about it right now. Is it family, career, happiness, self-development, serving God, or perhaps leaving a mark on history? Write in the comments what that meaning is for you, because in a few minutes your answer might change forever. Now let's get back to the analysis. When we started studying this question, the first thing that caught our eye was a strange pattern. Every single person you ask about the meaning of life gives their own unique answer. One person says that the meaning is found in love. Another claims that it is in knowing the truth. A third is convinced that the meaning is in serving a higher purpose, while a fourth says that there is no meaning at all, and that's okay. The result is total chaos. Billions of people, billions of answers, and none of them agree with each other. But what if it isn't chaos? What if behind all these different answers, there is a single mechanism that no one notices? We decided to start with religions, because it is religion that has been dictating to humanity what to live for regarding the last 3 millennia. And this is where the first oddity appears. Christianity says that the meaning of life is the salvation of the soul and eternal life with God. Buddhism asserts that the meaning is liberation from suffering through the attainment of nirvana. Hinduism insists on liberation from the cycle of rebirth upon reaching moksha. Islam teaches that the meaning lies in submitting to the will of Allah, in entering paradise. At first glance, they all seem different, but we dug deeper and found that each religion describes the exact same structure. Life is a test. You suffer here to receive a reward there. The meaning is not in the present, but in the future. It is not about what you do today, but what you will receive after death. All religions transfer meaning beyond life itself. The meaning of life turns out to be outside of life. This brings us to logical paradox number 1. If the meaning of life is found after death, then life itself has no meaning. It is just an exam, a rehearsal before the main men. But then, why do we need this life at all? Why didn't God create paradise right away and place souls there, if that is where real life happened? The traditional answer is, life is a test. God wants to see if you are worthy of paradise. But here, the logic completely collapses. If God is omniscient, he already knows the result of the test before it begins. He knows who will go to paradise and who will go to hell even before a person is born. Then why the test? Why all this theater of suffering if the ending is known in advance? Philosophers have been trying to solve this paradox for centuries. St. Augustine talked about free will. He argued that God knows the future but does not determine it. Man is free to choose, and God simply sees that choice in advance. It sounds convincing until you really start to think about it. If God sees my choice before I make it, then my choice already exists in the future. And if it exists, I cannot change it. Therefore, there is no free will. I am walking on rails that have already been laid, and I just call it. Calvin went further and honestly admitted, there is no free will. God has predetermined in advance who will be saved and who will be damned. But then the meaning of life disappears altogether, You are either chosen or you are not, and your actions do not matter. You can be a saint all your life, but if God has not chosen you, you will still go to hell. Conversely, you can sin left and right, but if you are chosen, you will be saved anyway. Where is the justice in that? Where is the meaning? We analyze this paradox from a strictly logical point of view. If the meaning of life is to get to heaven, and getting to heaven is predetermined, then there is no point in making an effort. If getting to heaven is not predetermined, then God is not omniscient. If God is not omniscient, he is not omnipotent. And if he is not omnipotent, why do we call him God? The circle closes. The religious concept of the meaning of life is based on a logical contradiction that cannot be resolved within the framework of traditional theology. But people continue to believe in it. Why? We found the answer in psychology. The human brain does not like uncertainty. It desperately needs an explanation, even if that explanation is contradictory. Religion provides a simple scheme. Live right, go to heaven. Live wrong, and you'll go to hell. This scheme is reassuring. It gives the illusion of control. The brain clings to it because the alternative is scarier, that life may have no meaning at all. But let's put religion aside for a minute and turn to the philosophers. Maybe they have found the answer. Aristotle said that the meaning of life is eudaimonia. This word is often translated as happiness, but that is inaccurate. Eudaimonia is flourishing, realizing one's potential, and living in accordance with virtue. According to Aristotle, a person is happy not when they experience pleasure, but when they become the best version of themselves. It sounds beautiful, but what is the best version? Who determines it? Aristotle believed that everything has its own nature, its own purpose. The purpose of a knife is to cut. The purpose of a tree is to grow. The purpose of a person is to think and act wisely. Therefore, the meaning of life is in the development of the mind and virtue, logical. But here, a problem arises. If the purpose of a person is in the mind, why are most people not philosophers? Why do they not strive for knowledge, but instead pursue money, power, and pleasure? Aristotle would say, because they do not understand their true nature, they are mistaken. But who decided that Aristotle is right and they are the ones who are mistaken? Maybe it is the other way around. Maybe human nature is not found in the mind, but in survival, reproduction, and domination. If that is the case, then the meaning of life is completely different. Friedrich Nietzsche believed exactly that. He argued that traditional morality is merely a lie invented by the weak to justify their own existence. The true meaning of life, he claimed, lies in the will to power. Humanity was not created to be kind and humble. We were created to conquer, to dominate, and to surpass ourselves. Nietzsche's Übermensch, or Superman, is someone who has cast aside all illusions of morality and religion to live by his own rules, creating his own values. Nietzsche's idea is tempting, it feels liberating, but it is also destructive. If everyone creates their own values, how will we ever agree to live together? If the strong have the right to trample the weak, what is to stop them from murder, violence, and exploitation? Nietzsche would answer that nothing will stop them, and that is simply normal. Morality is for the Superman is above morality. Here, Nietzsche's philosophy collides head-on with reality. A society built on the will to power is a war of all against all. Thomas Hobbes described this as the natural state of man. Life becomes lonely, poor, ruthless, beastly, and to avoid this, people enter into a social contract and create a state that protects them from themselves. According to Hobbes, the meaning of life is survival, and order is necessary for that survival. But again, the question arises, If the meaning of life is merely survival, why do people go to war, sacrificing themselves for an idea? Why do mothers throw themselves under cars to save their children? Why do dissidents risk their lives fighting for freedom? If the meaning were only survival, such actions would not exist. This implies that there is something higher than survival. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, found this answer in the most terrible conditions imaginable. He noticed that it was not the strongest or the healthiest who survived. Those who survived were those who had meaning. Those who knew why they were alive could endure almost anyhow. Frankl called this logotherapy, therapy through meaning. In his opinion, a person's main motivation is not pleasure, as Freud believed, nor power, as Adler believed, but the search for meaning. However, Frankl did not define what that meaning was. He said that everyone must find it for themselves. For one person, meaning is found in love, for another in creativity, for a third in suffering accepted with dignity. Meaning is unique to each person. That sounds wonderful until you realize that it is once again an evasion of the answer. Frankl shifted the responsibility onto the individual. You decide for yourself what the meaning is. But if everyone decides for themselves, then there is no objective meaning. Meaning becomes subjective, and subjective meaning is often an illusion. Imagine that I decided the meaning of my life is to collect beer caps. I devote my whole life to this. I find the rarest specimens and die happy, knowing that I have the best collection in the world. Was there meaning in my life? According to Frankl, yes, but objectively, no one needs my collection. In 50 years, it will be thrown away. In 100 years, no one will remember my name. So, the meaning I created was essentially self-deception. The existentialists went even further. Sartre said, "Life is absurd. There is no meaning, neither objective nor subjective. We are thrown into this world for no reason. We live without purpose, and we die forever. The universe doesn't care about us. There are no gods, no destiny. There is only chance and emptiness." It sounds depressing, and honestly, it is terrifying. Camus, Sartre's friend and opponent, acknowledged this absurdity, but offered another way out. He compared life to the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was punished by the gods and condemned to eternally roll a stone up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down again. Meaningless labor, endless repetition. But Camus said, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Yes, his labor is meaningless, but he can find joy in it. He can rebel against the absurd by accepting it and living in spite of the meaninglessness. It is a beautiful concept, but it is self-deception again. Camus says, accept the absurd and live as if there is meaning. But if there is no meaning, why live at all? Why not just end it right now? Camus acknowledged that this is the main question of philosophy, and his answer was, don't kill yourself, because that is capitulation to the absurd. Live in spite of it. But the logic is flawed. Why is capitulation bad if everything is meaningless anyway? Who cares whether you capitulate or not? The universe doesn't notice. Society will forget in a couple of weeks. You will die and you won't care either. We analyzed all these philosophical systems and saw one common pattern. Every philosopher tries to answer the question of the meaning of life, but no one can give a convincing, logically consistent answer. Aristotle relies on a dubious assumption about human nature. Nietzsche builds a system that leads to chaos. Frankl retreats into subjectivism. The existentialists acknowledge meaninglessness but urge us to live as if there were meaning. They're all right about one thing: traditional answers don't work. Religion is contradictory, morality is relative, and happiness is fleeting. But none of them could say what the true meaning is. And then we asked ourselves another question. Maybe the problem isn't with the answers, but with the question itself. What if the question about the meaning of life is wrong? What if humanity has been searching for 3,000 years for an answer to a question that doesn't actually exist? Let's look at it from another angle. When we ask what the meaning of life is, what are we really? We want to know why we exist. Who or what gave us a purpose, and exactly what that purpose is. These questions only make sense if someone or something actually created us with a specific intent. If there is a God who designed us, much like an engineer designs a machine, then we certainly have a purpose. A hammer is designed to drive nails. But what were humans created to do? To glorify God? To multiply? To explore the world? But what if there is no God? What if we appeared merely by chance as a result of evolution, without any plan or design? In that case, the question of the meaning of life becomes absurd. It's like asking, what is the meaning of a rock? Or what is the meaning of a cloud? A rock just is. A cloud just is. They were not created for a purpose. They exist simply because circumstances unfolded that way. The same is true for humans. We exist because billions of years ago, life appeared on Earth and evolved into complex organisms, one of which eventually learned to think. No one planned this. No one assigned us a purpose. We are simply an accident, a happy accident or an unhappy one, but an accident nonetheless. This thought is frightening, but it explains why no philosophical or religious system can give a convincing answer to the question of meaning, because there isn't one. There is no meaning to life in the sense that we are accustomed to thinking about it. There is no higher purpose, no destiny, and no reward after death. But then, why do we live, and why do we so desperately seek meaning? This is where we get to the most interesting part. We analyzed how the human brain works, and discovered something surprising. The brain is a machine designed for creating meaning. It cannot exist without it. It is literally incapable of perceiving the world as pure chaos. Even when we see random events, the brain tries to find a pattern, a reason, or a connection between them. Consider a famous experiment. People were shown 3 geometric shapes, a circle, a triangle, and a square, moving across a screen in random order. But the participants in the experiment did not see random movements. Instead, they saw a story. They said, the triangle is chasing the circle, and the square is protecting it. The triangle is the villain, the circle is the victim. The brain automatically created a narrative, inventing motives, roles, and conflict, even though there were just shapes moving randomly on a screen. This is the key. The human brain did not evolve to see the truth. It evolved to survive. And to survive, you need to be able to predict the future. You need to understand what will happen if you do this or that. You need to see cause and effect. You need to create models of the world. And this is where the most important part begins. The brain doesn't just create models of the world. It creates a model of itself. It invents a story about who you are, why you are alive, what is important, and what is not. This story is the meaning of your life, but it is not an objective meaning. It is an illusion that the brain creates so that you continue to act. Because without this illusion, you would simply stop. You would lie down on the couch and cease doing anything at all? Why get up if you are going to die anyway? Why work if wealth won't save you from the end? Why love if everyone you love will also die? The brain understands this danger, and to keep you from becoming depressed and ceasing to reproduce, it hides the truth from you. It creates the illusion of meaning. It makes you believe that your life is important, that your goals matter, and that there is something more to existence than just survival and reproduction. And this illusion works. People who have meaning live longer. They are happier and more resilient to stress. Studies show that those who believe their lives have purpose are less likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease, less likely to fall into depression, and better able to cope with loss. Meaning is not just a philosophical category, it is a biological mechanism for survival. But here lies the paradox. If meaning is an illusion, and we understand that, why does the illusion continue to work? Why can't I just say to myself, there is no meaning, it is all self-deception, and continue to live happily? Because the brain cannot turn off this function. It will create meaning even if you know it is an illusion. You can be an atheist fully understanding that there is no God, that the universe is indifferent, and that there will be nothing after death. Yet you will still get up in the morning, go to work, love your family, and make plans because your brain compels you to do it. It creates small meanings. You have to pay for your apartment. You have to feed your children. You have to finish that project. These small meanings add up to a big meaning. My life has purpose. And here we arrive at the main discovery. The true meaning of life is not what is written in sacred books or philosophical treatises. The true meaning is simply that the brain creates the illusion of meaning so that you continue to live. Life itself is the process of creating meaning. You don't live for something. You live to create meanings, goals, and stories about yourself. The meaning of life is not to live for paradise, glory, or happiness. It is to simply live, act, move forward, create, destroy, love, lose, search, find, and search again. It sounds trite, but it is true. All religions, all philosophies, and all searches for meaning are attempts by the brain to justify what it is already doing, to make you live. God, karma, eudaimonia, the will to power, these are all just props. The real show is that you get up every day, make choices, and act. That is what it is all about, the process of life itself. But people struggle to accept that. They want more. They want their lives to be part of some grand plan, to be rewarded after death, or to have their names go down in history. Why? Because death and the fear of it forces us to seek meaning beyond life. We cannot accept that everything we do will disappear with us. Our achievements, our loves, our thoughts, all of it will turn to dust. This thought is unbearable. And so, religions invented heaven, philosophers invented immortality through fame or ideas, and ordinary people invented children to continue their lineage. All of these strategies are aimed at one single thing: defeating death. But death cannot be defeated. We can only pretend that it does not exist. We construct an illusion of immortality, telling ourselves the soul is eternal, ideas last forever, or children will carry on our legacy. Yet, this is, once again, self-deception. And this is where the most frightening question arises. If meaning is an illusion, and we cannot defeat death, why live at all? We analyzed this question from every angle and found an answer no one expected. Yes, meaning is an illusion. Yes, there is nothing after death. Yes, the universe is indifferent to us. But despite all this, there is one thing that makes life worthwhile. It is life itself, the very experience of existence, the ability to feel, think, love, and suffer. This is the only thing we have, and it is the only thing that matters. Imagine you are offered a choice. You can live 100 years in complete happiness, but after death, you will cease to exist. Or you can choose not to live at all. What would you choose? Most people would choose to live because life, even if finite, is better than non-existence. Even if everything disappears after death, the very fact that you existed, that you felt, that you loved already has value. It has value not for the universe and not for history, but for you, right here and now. The meaning of life is to live it fully and consciously, without putting off happiness until later, until paradise, until retirement, until everything works out. Happiness is not a goal. It is a state that arises when you live the way you want to, not the way you should. But society teaches us the exact opposite. It says work first, then rest. Save money first, then you will be happy. Earn paradise first, then you will receive eternal life. These are all ways to make you sacrifice the present for an illusory future. But what if there is no future? What if you die tomorrow? Then your whole life will turn out to be preparation for an event that never happened. We analyze the biographies of thousands of people who shared their regrets on their deathbeds. Do you know what they regretted most often? They didn't regret missing out on money or fame. They regretted not living the way they wanted to. They regretted working jobs they hated, not confessing their love, not taking risks, not traveling, and not spending time with loved ones. They put their lives on hold and later never came. The true meaning of life is not to put things off, but to live right now. Do not wait for permission from God, society, or fate. Simply live and do what is important to you. Love those you love. Create what you want to create. Not because it will lead you to paradise or make you immortal, but because it is the only thing you have. This is not selfishness. This is honesty. We have pretended for too long that we live for something higher, for God, for our land, for future generations. But the truth is that we live for ourselves. And that is okay. It is natural. It is the only way to truly live. But society is terrified of this truth. If people realize they live for themselves, they will stop sacrificing themselves for abstract goals. They will stop working at jobs they dislike just to buy things they don't need. They would stop fighting for ideas they don't believe in. They would stop obeying rules they don't like. That is why society creates the illusion of a higher meaning. Religion says, live for God. The state says, live for your country. Corporations say, live for your career. They all want you to live for something external so they can control you. But you don't have to play by their rules. You can choose a different path. You can decide that the meaning of your life is not to serve someone or something, but to be yourself completely, without excuses and without fear. This is scary, however, because it means taking total responsibility for your life. You can no longer blame God, fate, or society for the fact that your life hasn't turned out the way you wanted. You choose how to live. If you are unhappy, it is your choice. You can change it at any moment, but most people do not want this responsibility. They prefer to believe their lives are predetermined, that they have no choice, and that they are victims of circumstance. It is easier that way, safer, but safety is an illusion. You are going to die anyway. The only question is whether you lived the life you wanted or the life others expected of you. We have come to the end of the first part of our analysis. Let's summarize what we have uncovered so far. Traditional answers to the question of meaning do not work. Religions transfer meaning to the afterlife, but cannot explain why this life is necessary. Philosophers offer different concepts of happiness, virtue, and power, but none of them are universal. Existentialists acknowledge absurdity, but urge us to live in spite of it, which is also a form of self-deception. We have discovered that the question of the meaning of life is wrongly posed. It assumes that life has a purpose imposed from the outside. But if we are a product of evolution, not creation, there is no external purpose. We exist by chance. However, the human brain cannot exist without meaning. It is biologically programmed to create meanings, goals, and stories. This illusion is necessary for survival. Without it, we would cease to act. The true meaning of life is not in achieving some higher goal, but in the process of living itself. You don't live for something, you live, to create meaning, to act, it is the only thing you have, and it is the only thing that matters. The fear of death makes us look for meaning beyond life, but all attempts to defeat death through faith, glory, or offspring are forms of self-deception. Death is inevitable. Accepting this fact is paradoxically liberate. Finally, society creates the illusion of a higher meaning in order to control people. Society teaches us to postpone happiness until later, to sacrifice the present for the sake of an illusory future. But the only moment we truly possess is now. The true meaning of life is to live consciously and fully according to our own rules, without expecting a reward after death or the approval of society, to live for the sake of life itself. But this is only the first part of the answer. We have already answered the question of whether life has meaning, concluding that while there is no objective meaning, subjective meaning is absolutely necessary. Now the next critical question arises. If I create meaning myself, how do I choose the right meaning? What makes one life more meaningful than another? And is there even a criterion for correctness? So we established in the first part that there is no objective meaning to life. This is not a failure of human knowledge. It is simply reality. The universe is indifferent. There may be no God. History will eventually forget us. But there is one thing that people overlook. When they reach this conclusion, they fall into despair. They ask, if there is no meaning, why live at all? This is a logical trap, and we are going to dismantle it. Yes, there is no objective meaning, but subjective meaning exists, and it is very real. It is real precisely because you create it. You are not forced to live. You choose to live, and that choice contains meaning. This is the point that philosophers usually miss. The meaning of life cannot be granted from the outside. It cannot be written in sacred books. It cannot be imposed by the education system or society. Meaning is what you create yourself every day, with every single choice you make. And what you create has value, not because it is approved by someone else, but because it is yours, because it comes from you. There you have it, a paradox that resolves the entire conflict between objectivity and subjectivity. If meaning is subjective, does that mean it has no value? On the contrary, it has enormous value because it is subjective, because it belongs to you. Imagine this situation. One person paints a picture only because he is paid to do so. Another paints a picture because he cannot help but paint. Physically, the canvases are identical, but one holds meaning while the other does not. The meaning is not found in the painting itself. The meaning is found in why it was painted. Was it because there was a choice, or because there was no choice? We analyzed this point through the lens of psychology, and everywhere we looked, we arrived at the same conclusion. People are happy when they do what they want, and unhappy when they do what they have to. The difference lies not in the actions themselves, but in whether you chose them or someone else chose them for you. Psychologists call this autonomy, the deep-seated need to be the author of your own life. This need is as fundamental as the need for food and sleep. A person can survive without food for several weeks, but without a sense of autonomy, without a sense that their life is their own, their psyche collapses. That is why people burn out at work, even if they are paid well. It is because they didn't choose the job. It was imposed on them by circumstance. They work because they have to, not because they want to, and it slowly kills them. That is why people in prison lose their minds, even if they are well fed, because they have no freedom of choice. They cannot choose what to do, when to do it, or who to communicate with. Everything is decided for them, and this loss of autonomy destroys the psyche. But here is what is interesting. The exact same situation can be a prison for one person and the meaning of life for another. It all depends on who chose the situation. Consider a monk in a monastery. He lives a rigid existence. He gets up early, prays for hours, eats little, and sleeps on a hard bed. All his days are strictly regimented. Yet, if he has chosen this, he is happy, because this is the life he selected. He is not forced. Conversely, a person who is forced to live against their will in those same conditions will be unhappy and broken, because it is not their choice. The difference lies in only one thing: freedom of choice. It seems paradoxical, but it is reality. Restrictions do not make life meaningless. The absence of choice makes it meaningless. Therefore, the first step towards a meaningful life is not understanding the objective meaning. It is a simple decision. I choose my life. I take responsibility for my choices. I understand that I can influence my life, and I begin to exert that influence. It sounds easy, but it only seems easy until you actually start doing it, because choice is responsibility. If you choose, you forfeit the right to blame others. You can no longer say, I am unhappy because the system is against me, my boss punishes me, my family pressures me. You have to say, I am unhappy because I chose this. I chose to stay in a job I don't like. I chose to stay in a relationship that doesn't suit me. I chose not to develop, not to take risks, not to change my life. And that is very painful. It is far easier to identify an external enemy, the system, the government, your boss, someone else. But in that case, you remain a victim. You give up power over your life. When you take responsibility, you become the main character in your story. Yes, there are many things in your life that you did not choose. You did not choose your genetics, your origins, your family, or your historical circumstances, but you do choose what to do with what you have been given. This is the only choice that really matters. Here is the second key point. The meaning of life is not about living well. The meaning is to live honestly with yourself. These are two different concepts, and people often confuse them. To live well implies achieving success, wealth, status, and social approval. To live honestly means being true to your own beliefs and values. The paradox is that a person can live well and still be unhappy, or can live poorly and yet be happy. If in the first case they betrayed themselves, and in the second they remain true to themselves. History knows many examples. A person achieves everything they thought they wanted: money, power, fame, but inside they are empty, because to achieve this, they betrayed their principle. They became someone else entirely. They played a role that led to success, but was completely alien to their true nature. Conversely, there are those who choose the difficult path simply because it is their path. There are artists who live in poverty because they cannot help but create, scientists who devote their lives to research without a single thought for profit, activists who risk everything for what they believe in. They may be poor, often persecuted, and unnoticed by the masses, but they are happy because they live honestly. They are true to themselves. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche meant when he spoke of being true to oneself. He did not mean being true to one's momentary whims and impulses, but true to one's essence, one's calling, the reason one came into this world. But how do you know what your essence is? How do you find your calling? This question has tormented people throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Why? Because the traditional paths have vanished. In the past, your role was predetermined. You were a farmer, like your father, or a craftsman, like your grandfather. Your fate was decided for you. It was limiting, certainly, but it offered certainty. Now you are free. You can be anything you want, but this freedom is paralyzing because the choices are endless. How do you choose? How do you know if your choice is the right one? We analyzed this dilemma and found a pattern. Every person harbors two kinds of desires: authentic desires and desires imposed by society. Authentic desires are what you want when no one is listening, when no one is judging. They are the desires that live deep within you, regardless of what the world tells you. Desires imposed by society are what you think you should want. They are the things that bring money, status, and approval. They are what seem right, reasonable, and ambitious. Most people confuse these two types of desire. They become what society wants them to be and completely forget their true desires. Then, at 50, they wake up and realize, this isn't me. This is just a role I've been playing. How can you tell a true desire from an imposed one? Simply put, genuine desires generate energy. They excite you, even if they are difficult, especially if they are difficult. When you talk about what you truly love, your voice sounds different. It carries a different intonation, a different energy. Your eyes shine, your body tenses with excitement. This is the sign of authentic. Imposed desires, on the other hand, sound mechanical. You talk about them the way you talk about the weather, without energy, without life, because they are not yours. You are simply repeating what you have heard hundreds of times, that you must be successful, that you must be rich, that you must be respected. If you listen carefully to yourself, you will hear the difference. The problem is that few people listen. People are too busy listening to the voices of others, the voices of parents, teachers, the media, and culture, and at some point, they forget that they have their own voice. We analyzed people who live meaningfully, and they all shared one thing in common. At some point in their lives, they stopped listening to others and started listening to themselves. Sometimes it happened early in their 20s, sometimes late in their 50s, but when it happened, their lives changed. One man worked as an accountant for 2 decades. The money was good, but every day he was dying inside. At 42, he realized his life was slipping away. He divorced his wife, with whom he was unhappy. He quit his job. He spent all his savings on learning to play the guitar and traveling. Now he is 50. He lives in a small apartment, sings in clubs, and is happier than ever. Is this success? From a social point of view, no. From the point of view of the meaning of life, yes. A woman was a perfect mother and wife. Her whole life was devoted to her family. But when her children grew up, she felt that she had years left, and she hadn't yet lived her own life. She started studying. Now she is a historian and writes books. Her life began after she stopped being the perfect mother and became herself. A young man grew up in a family of doctors. Everyone expected him to be a doctor, but he loved mathematics. He was afraid of disappointing his parents, but he was even more afraid of living someone else's life. He became a programmer, not because it pays well, but because it is his calling. These are not success stories in the traditional sense. These are stories of honesty, stories of how people stopped playing the role assigned to them and started living their own lives. And at that moment, their lives took on meaning. The third key point is this: the meaning of life is not what you achieve, it is what you build. Here is another paradox people miss. They think of meaning as a destination, like a mountain peak that must be conquered. They think, if I conquer that peak, find love, achieve success, or write a book, meaning will be found and I can finally relax. But that is wrong. If meaning is a place you need to get to, then right now, while you are on your way, there is no meaning. That implies your life has no meaning yet, and that is nonsense. In fact, meaning is the road, the journey, the process, not the result. Meaning is how you build your life every day. It is found in what choices you make, what challenges you take on, and how you grow. A climber who has dreamed of conquering Everest his whole life may never actually conquer it. A storm, illness, lack of money, many reasons can get in the way. But does that mean his life is meaningless? The meaning lies in how he prepared, how he trained, and how he surpassed himself with every attempt. The meaning lies in the journey, not the summit. A writer may never become famous, his books may never be read by millions, but the meaning is in what he writes, what he creates, and the fact that he is honest in his work. The meaning is not in whether a publisher will buy his book. The meaning is in the process of writing itself. A parent may not raise a genius child. A child may not achieve anything special, but the meaning lies in how the parent loves, how they support, and how they pass on value. They became someone else. They played a role that led to success, but was completely alien to their true nature. Conversely, there are people who choose the difficult path simply because it is their path. There are artists who live in poverty because they cannot help but create. Scientists who devote their entire lives to research without thinking about earnings. Activists who risk their lives for what they believe in. They may be poor, often persecuted, and unnoticed by the majority, but they are happy because they live honestly. They are true to themselves. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of being true to oneself. He did not mean being true to one's momentary whims and impulses, but true to one's essence, one's calling, the reason one came into this world. But how do you know what your essence is? How do you find your calling? This is a question that has tormented people throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Why? Because the traditional paths have disappeared. In the past, your role was predetermined. You were a farmer, like your father, or a craftsman, like your grandfather. Your fate was decided for you. It was limiting, certainly, but it offered certainty. Now you are free. You can be anything you want, but this freedom is paralyzing because the choices are endless. How do you choose? How do you know if your choice is right? We analyzed this dilemma and found a pattern. Every person harbors two kinds of desires: authentic desires and desires imposed by society. Authentic desires are what you want when no one is listening, when no one is judging. They are the desires that live within you, regardless of what the world tells you. Desires imposed by society are what you think you should want. They are the things that will bring you money, status, and approval. They are what seem right, reasonable, and ambitious. Most people confuse these two types of desires. They become what society wants them to be and completely forget their true desires. Then at 50, they wake up and realize, this isn't me. This is just a role I've been playing. How can you tell a true desire from an imposed one? Simply put, genuine desires generate energy. They excite you, even if they are difficult, especially if they are difficult. When you talk about what you truly like, about what you want to do, your voice sounds different. It carries a different intonation, a different energy. Your eyes shine and your body tenses with excitement. This is the sign of authenticity. Imposed desires, on the other hand, sound mechanical. You talk about them the way you talk about the weather, without energy, without life, because they are not you. You're simply repeating what you have heard hundreds of times, that you must be successful, that you must be rich, that you must be respected. If you listen carefully to yourself, you will hear the difference. The problem is that few people listen. People are too busy listening to the voices of others, the voices of parents, teachers, the media, and culture. And at some point, they forget that they have their own voice. We analyzed people who live meaningfully, and they all had one thing in common. At some point in their lives, they stopped listening to others and started listening to themselves. Sometimes it happened early in their 20s, sometimes late in their 50s. But when it happened, their lives changed. One man worked as an accountant for 2 decades. The money was good, but every day he was dying inside. At 42, he realized that life was ending. He divorced his wife, with whom he was unhappy. He quit his job. He spent all his savings on learning to play the guitar and traveling. Now he is 55. He lives in a small apartment, sings in clubs, and is happier than ever. Is this success? From a social point of view, no. From the point of view of the meaning of life, yes. A woman was a perfect mother and wife. Her whole life was devoted to her family. But when her children grew up, she felt that she had years left, and she hadn't yet lived her own life. She started studying. Now she is a historian and writes books. Her life began after she stopped being the perfect mother and became herself. A young man grew up in a family of doctors. Everyone expected him to be a doctor, but he loved mathematics. He was afraid of disappointing his parents, but he was even more afraid of living someone else's life. He became a programmer, not because it pays well, but because it is his call. These are not success stories in the traditional sense. These are stories of honesty, stories of how people stopped playing the role assigned to them and started living their own lives. And at that moment, their lives took on meaning. The third key point is this: the meaning of life is not what you achieve, it is what you build. Here is another paradox that people miss. They think of meaning as a destination, like the top of a mountain that needs to be conquered. They think, if I conquer that peak, find love, achieve success, or write a book, meaning will be found, and I can finally relax. But that is wrong. If meaning is a place you need to get to, then right now, while you are on your way, there is no meaning. That implies your life has no meaning yet, and that is nonsense. In fact, meaning is the road, the journey, the process, not the result. Meaning is how you build your life every day. It is found in what choices you make, what challenges you take on, and how you grow. A climber who has dreamed of conquering Everest his whole life may never actually conquer it. A storm, illness, lack of money, many reasons can get in the way. But does that mean his life is meaningless? The meaning lies in how he prepared, how he trained, and how he surpassed himself with every attempt. The meaning lies in the journey, not the summit. A writer may never become famous, his books may never be read by millions, but the meaning is in what he writes, what he creates, and the fact that he is honest in his work. The meaning is not in whether a publisher will buy his book. The meaning is in the process of writing itself. A parent may not raise a genius child. A child may not achieve anything special. But the meaning lies in how the parent loves, how they support, and how they pass on values. The meaning is not in the result. The meaning is in the relationship in which it happens. This is where most people go wrong. They put their lives on hold for later, waiting for the moment when there will be results, when there will be success, when there will be happiness. They say, when I get this job, I'll be happy. When I make $1 million, I'll be at peace. When I find my soulmate, I'll be complete. But then, when they achieve this, they realize that happiness has not come, because happiness is not found at the destination. Happiness is found in going where you want to go. Hedonistic adaptation, which we talked about, is a phenomenon of precisely this nature. You achieve a goal, get a brief burst of happiness, then get used to it, and look for a new goal. It is a treadmill that leads nowhere, because you are looking for happiness in a place where it is impossible to find. Happiness is not something you can achieve like the top of a mountain. It is a process. It is a state that arises when you are engaged in something that is meaningful to you, not when you arrive, but while you are on your way. A middle manager who spends his whole life jumping from one job to another, always looking for a slightly better position, will never be satisfied because he seeks satisfaction in the result, and the result is just a new job that will soon become boring. A musician who will never become famous but plays every day because he can't help playing is much happier, because he seeks satisfaction in the process, in the music itself. We analyzed studies on happiness, and everywhere we found the same conclusion. People are happy not when they get results, but when they work on something meaningful, when there is a challenge that matches their abilities, when they grow. This state is the flow we talked about earlier. The fourth key point, the meaning of life is not something big and abstract. Meaning is small, concrete, and personal. People often look for some grand meaning to become someone famous, to change the world, to leave a mark on history. It seems noble, but it is also a trap. First, very few people actually change the world, and most people will never do anything like that. If they wait for that to feel meaningful, they will never feel it. Second, the more global the goal, the more abstract it is from reality. You say, I want to change the world, but how are you going to do that? Where will you start? And at what point will you feel that you have achieved this goal? It is a never-ending pursuit. Third, most people who say they want to save the world actually want to feel important. They want to be noticed, and they want fame under the guise of a noble cause. The real meaning is much simpler. It could be loving one person. It could be being a good parent. It could be creating beautiful things. It could be helping people around you. It could be growing a garden. It could be taking in a stray animal. Nothing grand, nothing that will change history. But for you, it is everything. For the woman you are helping, it is a lifesaver. To the child you are raising, you are the whole world. To the animal you are saving, you are its savior. Meaning is not measured by scale. Meaning is what is valuable to you, and it can be something completely ordinary. Here are the stories we found. A senior mechanic who has been repairing cars his whole life. No one knows his name. His work is inconspicuous, but he does it with such perfection, with such love, that his machines last longer than others. People come to him because they know he will do a good job, and for him, that is meaning. Not fame, not money, but the fact that he does it well, that he can rely on himself, that his work is of high quality. A teacher in a small village. Her students later leave and become someone important in the big world, but she doesn't know that. She just teaches children every day, tells them about the world, shows them that life can be beautiful, and for her that is the meaning. Not gratitude from former students, not fame, but the fact that she can light a fire in a child's eyes, showing them the light, An artist who paints pictures and puts them on a shelf. No one sees them, but he paints because he cannot help but paint. Because in the moment of creating a painting, he is alive. Nothing else matters. Not money, not recognition, because meaning is not the result. Meaning is life itself in creativity. The meaning of life is not the apotheosis. It is not the final scene of a film when everything is clear. Meaning is all of life. It is every moment. It is things that would seem ordinary, but which take on depth when you notice them. The fifth key point is that the meaning of life requires pain. This is what people miss when they discuss meaning. People want meaning without a price. They want to live honestly, but without anyone judging them. They want to follow their dreams, but in a way that is safe and profitable. They want meaning that does not require sacrifice, but meaning always requires sacrifice, because meaning is a choice, and choosing one thing means giving up another. If you choose creativity, you give up stability. If you choose freedom, you give up security. If you choose a challenge, you give up comfort. And almost always this price is painful, because pain is a signal that you are going against the grain, against what society expects of you, against what you have been taught since childhood. A mother who decides to leave home and start a career feels guilty because she was taught that her place is at home, that motherhood is her main role. She feels pain because she is betraying what has been ingrained in her head. A young person who rejects the prestigious career his parents wanted for him and chooses something modest but his own experiences, the pain of disappointment in his parents' eyes. It is painful to watch. It is more than the pain of his own failure. A person who decides to live more honestly may lose friends because his honesty will be a mirror for their dishonesty, and they may feel uncomfortable around him. This is incredibly painful because deep down, we all crave approval. We want everyone to agree with us. But without pain, there is no meaning. Without pain, you simply function. You do not grow. Without pain, you remain the exact same person. Psychologists understand this well. A growing person is a person in a zone of discomfort. If you are completely within your comfort zone, you are not growing. If you are in a zone of panic, you become paralyzed. But if you are on the edge where there is a challenge, but it is surmountable, that is where you grow. And that process is inherently painful. People who live meaningfully are not people who have avoided pain. They are people who have gone through pain and continued moving forward. They are people who have felt the resistance of society and have not broken down, who have heard the voice of their parents in their heads calling them failures, and who have made their own choices anyway. Consider these stories. A person chooses a profession they despise simply because it pays well. He becomes depressed because every single day he does what he hates. This is the pain of stagnation. Conversely, a person changes careers at 40, losing money, respect, and stability in the process. This is the pain of growth, the pain of honesty. The second pain makes sense. The first does not. The meaning of life is not to escape pain. The meaning is to face the right kind of pain. It is the understanding that pain is a signal that you are moving, that you are changing something, that you are alive. This distinction is crucial because people often confuse two types of pain: the pain of living dishonestly and the pain of growth. The first pain should be avoided at all costs. The second should be embraced. A person stuck in a job they don't like experiences pain because their life does not belong to them. This pain screams, change. A person who starts a new project, writes a book, or learns something new also experiences pain. It is the pain of uncertainty, the fear that they might not succeed. But this pain is completely different. This pain says, you are alive, you are developing. The difference is simple. If pain makes you shrink, close yourself off, and retreat, it is the pain of stagnation. If pain makes you move, even if you are terrified, it is the pain of growth. The meaning of life is inextricably linked to the latter. Meaning is an encounter with the pain of growth. It is accepting that life will be difficult, that you will make mistakes, and that you will fall, but in the process, you will truly live. The sixth key point is simple, yet it is the one most often ignored. The meaning of life is now, not later. People constantly say, when I retire, I will start living. When my children grow up, I will start living. When I become the boss, I will start living. When I find love, I will start living. When I get rich, I will start living. All of these wins blur the present, turning today into a useless waiting room, a mere transitional period before real life begins. And so, people go through life noticing nothing, just waiting. But retirement may not come. There may be a stroke. There may be an accident. You could die tomorrow, and all your postponed meaning will vanish with you. Even if you live to see retirement, there are no guarantees. You may be too sick to travel. You may be too lonely. You may lose the ability to enjoy yourself because you spent the soul of that joy years ago while working. Here is a story. A man worked as an accountant for 40 years. He put off his life until retirement. 6 months after retiring, he suffered a massive stroke. Now he can't talk, he can't travel, and he can't enjoy himself. He can only sit and stare at the wall. The meaning he postponed never arrived. Another story. A woman worked as a nurse and hated it, but she put off changing jobs until she was eventually fired for a mistake. Now she is 70 and lives in a nursing home. She realizes that she spent the absolute best years of her life doing something she didn't want to do, and that thought torments her more than any physical pain. The meaning of life is not what you achieve in the end. Meaning is what you feel right now. Meaning is something you build every day, in every moment. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have goals. Goals are necessary. Without them, there is no direction. But a goal is not meaning. A goal is simply a tool to channel your energy in the right direction, in the present. If your goal is to become an artist, the meaning is not found in becoming an artist. The meaning is found in painting every day, in improving, and in creating. If you become an artist, that is a bonus. But if you never become a famous artist, yet you created every single day, you have already lived a meaningful life. If your goal is to find love, the meaning is not found in securing a partner. The meaning is found in being able to love, in being open, and in enjoying connection. If you meet someone, that will be wonderful. If not, you have still lived a life full of genuine connection. This reprograms your thinking. Instead of thinking, I will be happy when, you start thinking, I am happy because, I am happy because, I am happy because, I am happy because I learn. I am happy because I am alive while I am alive. And that switch changes everything, because happiness becomes a commodity that is no longer scarce, no longer something you have to find in the distant future. Happiness becomes a choice you make right now. Research confirms this. People who live consciously in the present are happier than people who are constantly waiting. People who are grateful for what they have feel richer than people who constantly want more. People who focus on the process are less anxious than people who focus only on the results. The seventh key point. The meaning of life is a synthesis of thoughts, feelings, and actions, not any one of them alone. Here is another common mistake. People think that meaning is purely an intellectual understanding. They think if I read philosophy and understand what meaning is, everything will be fine. But it doesn't work that way, because meaning is not just in the head. A philosopher can describe the meaning of life perfectly, yet at the same time live a completely meaningless life. A writer can write about beauty with a perfect technique, yet be dead inside. A teacher can teach people how to live, but not know how to live himself. This happens because they know, but they do not feel. They understand with their minds, but their hearts remain deaf. Meaning is not just intellectual understanding. Meaning is a feeling. It is when you are 8 years old, playing in the sand, and you forget about time. The whole world disappears, and only the game remains. It is when you love someone and you simply want to be with them. Nothing else matters. It is when you do what you love and you don't think about anything else, because you are completely present. But feeling is not action. Feeling is only half of the equation. The other half is when you act on that feeling. It is when you don't just feel like you want to do something. You actually do it despite your fear and despite your uncertainty. A person may feel that they want to write, but if they never sit down and write anything, it will remain just a feeling. They will say, I would like to be a writer, but these are just words. Meaning arises the moment you sit down and write. Even if you are a bad writer, when you take responsibility for that feeling and materialize it in the real world. That is why people who live meaningfully are people of action, not just people who talk eloquently about meaning. They are people who do what makes sense to them. It can be a modest action, simply doing your job well, taking care of your loved ones, learning a new skill, or trying new things. But it is action. It is the materialization of what is important to you, and that is where meaning becomes real. Not in your head, not in your heart separately, but in the synthesis of thought, feeling, and action. The 8th key point is that a meaningful life requires solitude. This may seem contradictory because we just talked about the importance of connections, but it is not a contradiction. It is a complement. Yes, people need other people, but people also need themselves. They need moments when they are alone with themselves and can hear their own voice, because this voice is very quiet. It is easily drowned out by the voices of others. And if you never create silence, if you never stay alone with yourself, you will lose that voice entirely. We live in an era of relentless noise, social media, news, crowds, music. There is never any silence, and in this noise there are thousands of voices. The voice of culture, the voice of the system, the voices of other people. Amidst all this, your own voice disappears. People who live meaningfully are people who protect their time alone. They cherish the moments when they are with themselves, because only in this solitude can they hear what they truly need. It can be meditation, it can be a walk in the woods, it can be sitting on a riverbank, or it can be just sitting in the dark, but it is necessary. This is not depression, and this is not self-isolation. This is a conscious disconnection from external noise in order to connect with your inner voice. When you hear that voice, you understand what you really need. You can ask yourself what you really want, what is truly important to you, and what scares you the most. And the answers to these questions come irrationally. They come as a feeling, as intuition, as a small, quiet voice that speaks the truth. But to hear this voice, you need silence, you need solitude, You need time when no one asks anything of you, when no one demands anything, and when you simply are. People are afraid of loneliness because our culture teaches them that loneliness is bad, that being alone means you are a failure, or that no one loves you. But this is a lie. Solitude is simply time with yourself, and it is absolutely necessary. The ninth key point. The meaning of life is expansion. It is the act of going beyond yourself. At first glance, this contradicts what we have been saying. If the meaning is to be yourself and to live for yourself, how can it also be about expansion and going beyond yourself? The paradox lies in the fact that you essentially become yourself through others. You grow through love. You grow through teaching. You grow through helping. You grow through what you give to the world. People who live only for themselves eventually come to a standstill. They reach a point where there is nothing left to take for themselves because the ego has limited needs. When the ego is satisfied, emptiness follows. But people who expand, who live not only for themselves, but who give, love, teach, and serve, those people never reach a point of saturation because service is infinite and love is infinite. We analyze this with example. A rich person who has accumulated a vast amount of money ultimately feels emptiness. Money itself does not give meaning because hoarding is for the self. But a rich person who gives money to help others, who creates charitable organizations, and who sees how his resources change lives, that person feels meaning because he expands. His life becomes more than just his ego. A parent who lives only for himself eventually ceases to be a good parent because children develop faster than selfish love can adapt, and at some point, the parent can no longer give to them. But a parent who expands into their children, who sees them not as obstacles to their life, but as an extension of their life, grows along with them. Every stage of a child's development requires growth from the parent. The meaning of life is found when you understand that your life is not a separate island, it is part of a vast continent. What you do affects others. Your choices create waves that spread out into the world, and when you start to think about this, you begin to live more responsibly, not because someone is forcing you to, but because you understand that your life is not only yours, it is inextricably connected to the lives of other people. The 10th and final key point brings everything full circle. The meaning of life is the acceptance of death. Here is the paradox that completes the entire puzzle. It is impossible to live meaningfully if you are afraid of death, because the fear of death makes you put off life until later. It makes you look for ways not to think about the end. It drives you to accumulate things, build a legacy, and look for desperate ways to become immortal. All these strategies are merely attempts to avoid the unavoidable, death. But death cannot be cheated, and as long as you try to run from it, you are not truly living. When you finally accept death, when you look it squarely in the face and say, yes, I am mortal, I will die, and that is okay, in that precise moment, you become free. Because suddenly, there is only one thing that matters: life. Specifically, this moment right now. People who have survived cancer, who have survived war, or who have endured concentration camps often share the same revelation when they stared death in the face. When they truly believed they were going to die, they realized that everything else was meaningless. All that remained was life itself, the very moment they were in. And when they survived, they lived differently. They spent more time with their loved ones. They did what they truly wanted. They didn't put things off until later because they knew exactly how close death was. They knew that time might run out. But you don't have to survive cancer to understand this. You can simply acknowledge that you are mortal, that you will die, and that it is inevitable. In that acknowledgement, there is liberation. Because when death ceases to be an enemy you fight, it becomes a teacher you listen to. It teaches you what is actually important. It teaches you not to give up what is valuable. It teaches you to live while you are alive. It sounds grim, but it is actually profoundly liberating because you stop living in fear. You stop procrastinating. You stop being a puppet on the strings of the system. You become yourself, completely honestly and fully alive. These are the 10 key points. This is what we uncovered when we analyzed the true meaning of existence. It is not something external waiting to be found like a hidden treasure. It is something you create every single day with every choice you make. The meaning of life is the choice to be the author of your own story, not merely a reader of someone else's script. It is honesty with yourself. It is life in the process, not in the results. It is small and personal, not big and abstract. It is the pain of growth. It is now, not later. It is a synthesis of thought, feeling, and action. It is the solitude from which you hear your own voice. It is expanding beyond yourself, and it is the acceptance of death. But even when you understand all of this, the question remains, how do you apply it in real life? How can you live this way in a world that doesn't want you to live this way? How do you not break under the pressure of a system that is constantly trying to change you? This is the most practical question, and the answer is not a philosophical treatise, but a technique. First, start listening to yourself every day. Set aside time to be alone. No internet, no company, just you, one-on-one with your thoughts. Listen to what your inner voice is saying. It is very quiet, but if you listen closely, you will hear it. Second, start with small actions. You don't need to radically overhaul your life overnight. Just do something every day that brings you closer to the life you want. If you want to be more honest, be honest in just one conversation. If you want to follow your dream, spend 15 minutes on it today. Third, surround yourself with people who truly support you. Not just people you like, but people who believe in your potential, who see who you really are, and who don't try to change you. If there are no such people in your life right now, find them. They exist. Fourth, learn the power of saying no. When something doesn't align with your values, or when something distracts you from what is important, learn to refuse it. This is very difficult because we were taught to be obedient, to be good, but every yes to something unnecessary is a no to something important. Fifth, be prepared for conflict. As you start living more honestly, you will encounter resistance. People will be unhappy. The system will put pressure on you. Your family may not understand. This is normal. Conflict is a sign that you are moving forward. Sixth, stop seeking approval. This is the hardest challenge in our era of social media, where every action is accompanied by the expectation of a reaction from others. But when you live honestly, you don't wait for applause. You do what makes sense to you, regardless of whether people like it or not. Seventh, learn from your mistakes. You will make many. You will choose the wrong path. You will fall, and that is okay. Every mistake is a lesson. Every mistake brings you one step closer to the truth. Eighth, do not rush. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't have to find your ultimate meaning next week. You can search for it for years, and that is fine, because the process of searching is already meaningful in itself. And lastly, remember that you are not alone. Yes, life is an individual journey, but people who live meaningful lives have never lived in complete isolation. They lived with people who supported them. They lived in service to others. They lived in love. The meaning of life is not abstract philosophy. It is practical. It is every day, and it is every choice you make. Let us now return to the very beginning, to the question we asked in the first part. What is the true meaning of life? We have gone through a long analysis. We have examined religions, philosophies, and psychology. We have found that there is no objective meaning, but that subjective meaning is very real. We have discovered 10 key elements that make up a meaningful existence. And now, at the end, we can finally answer. The true meaning of life is life itself. It is simply life, without embellishment, without complex explanations, and without lofty, unattainable goals. It is life in its simplest form. It means being alive, breathing, feeling, thinking, acting, loving, losing, searching, finding, making mistakes, and learn. It means being yourself completely, without masks, without roles, without trying to please anyone, just being. It means being here, right now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, but now, in this moment, in this breath, in this very word, because that is all you have. That is the only thing that is real right now. This minute, this day, everything else is just an illusion, a future that may not come, and a past that cannot be changed. Imaginary meanings, imaginary goals, and imaginary stories. We are surrounded by them. But this moment right now is real. It is solid. It is here. And the true meaning of life is to be fully present in this now, not half-heartedly, not lost in fantasies, and not buried in expectations, but completely and absolutely here. When you eat, simply eat. Don't eat while obsessing over what you need to do next. Just eat. When you listen to someone, truly listen. Don't listen while formulating your response. Just listen. When you work, work. Don't work while dreaming about the weekend. Just work. When you rest, truly rest. Don't try to rest while feeling guilty for not doing anything useful. Just rest. In every moment where you are completely present, there is life. And in every moment where there is life, there is meaning. That is the true answer. It is not a long academic treatise, nor a complicated philosophy. It is simply the act of living life fully, honestly, right here and right now. This is what we discovered when we analyzed everything humanity has ever said about the meaning of existence. This is what people who live meaningfully already know. This is what those who did not put off living understood before they died. And it is available to everyone. It is not reserved for the chosen few or for philosophers. It is available to you right now. The meaning of life is not found in the future. The meaning of life is not found in achievements. The meaning of life is not found in what history will remember. The meaning of life is found in the fact that you are living right now, fully, honestly, and alive. And that is enough. In fact, it is not only enough, it is all you will ever need. We have moved from the first part, where we dismantled the illusions surrounding the meaning of life, to the second, where we showed you how to build. We moved from the objective impossibility of meaning to the subjective reality of its creation, from despair to liberation, from hopelessness to action, from the search for meaning to the actual living of meaning. This is not a final answer that suggests you can sit back and relax. It is an invitation in constant practice. Every day you choose to live meaningfully or to retreat into unconsciousness. Every day is a new choice. And this is perhaps the most important discovery of all. The meaning of life is not a destination, It is the road you walk every single day. It is not a prize you receive for fulfilling a set of conditions. It is what you are already creating simply by living honestly. That is the true meaning of life.